Yes, guys, how you doing? Welcome back to the Spurs Talk Show. I am Sean Butler. Bug Team Loans up in front, doing the things she loves to do. A few apologies before I get going. One, I don't have my mic pop filter with me. I've lost it somewhere over the weekend. Can't find it anywhere. Maybe Bugsy's chewed it up and it's buried somewhere. So I apologise in advance if the wind is popping. I'll try my best to filter it out. Number two, apologies for the tardiness in my content. I've taken 4 days off and, had things going on in life with other businesses that I'm involved in and prioritising that sort of stuff for a little while and really didn't have the time. And then it's such a law of the sod that during that period when you're unavailable, some news comes out regarding MSP Capital, which is, of course, a topic very close to my heart. Multi-club ownership, potential investments into Tottenham Hotspur, and what does it all look like? Well, listen, guys, I've got to be entirely honest. I'm going to pour a little bit of cold water over it, if I'm entirely honest. There's more questions that I have than answers. First and foremost, let's start with the story. Paul O'Keefe, a club insider, came out on a tweet and said that Tottenham are in talks with MSP Capital. I think that was on Thursday night or Friday morning, maybe. And he said that Tottenham are also looking to speak to 6 other potential suitors. Now, that's not new information. I mean, it is new information potentially regarding Paul O'Keefe talking about it. But the idea that Tottenham are seeking investment is not new information. We found that out a few months ago. And remember, all the way back to about this time, May last year, 2023, John the Jaffe's name was on everyone's lips. In fact, leading up the start of 2023, because he was interested in buying Tottenham. He ended up going into Everton and all of the kind of rigmarole that has taken place at Everton, which is still no clearer with 777 partners, who's in bed with who, to the tune of how much money. And, it leaves a lot of questions around, even if the story is true and the conversations are imminent and have been happening, who do you want as an investor? Do you want an investor just to come in with capital? Do you want an investor to come in with multi-club ownership experience? And in that regard, despite the names that I'm about to bring to your attention, MSP Capital actually have a fairly decent track record. I've explained before that MCOs, multi-club ownership models, they fail more often than they succeed. Especially when you're buying your first club, and maybe even your second club, when you sort of drip feed 1 or 2 clubs into a multi-club ownership model, there is a conflict of interest, a competition for resources, the shared learnings that come from something like the City Football Group, who have got, 15 different clubs, is nowhere near as efficient, nowhere near as well-rounded. The ability to have, your brand, your presence in every corner of the world, like City Football Group do, is a wonderful way for them to not only identify the talents that are emerging out of those areas every single year, but also to be able to convince them to join because you've already got representatives in the area. Clubs that don't have that, Tottenham Hotspur don't have a multi-club ownership model. They're one of the people that do geographical scouting situations. So, there'll be someone in South America, there'll be someone in Japan. I think Brighton, from memory, were a team that, and they are part of a multi-club ownership, a small one that does very well with them, but they have a positional scouting set up. So they have a goalkeeping scout that will travel wherever in the world to see any potential new up-and-coming goalkeeper, etc. So there's loads of different ways you can go about it, but the purposes of this conversation is, of course, before we get to whether we want it, is it really feasible? And that starts with the Everton story. As you may know, this time last year, MSP Capital put in a bid for Everton to buy them wholly outright from Moshiri, and it was rejected because of a dialogue. Sorry, it wasn't wholly outright. It was an initial large sum that was going to become a takeover of Moshiri's stake eventually. But there is another debtor, another creditor rather, another someone who owns a lot of debt onto Everton who said no because they would have been diluted from it. As a consequence of that, they walked away. 777 Partners came in, and they're the other multi-club ownership outfit that we spoke about on this channel just a couple of weeks ago when we were talking. I did a video, so I'll put it above so you can go and watch it. Be careful what you wish for when it comes to multi-club ownership, because there's a lesson to be learned here that you need to do your due diligence, and even the people that are probably doing their due diligence sometimes can get gazumped in the game of deceit. And I think that's what's happened to a degree with regards to MSP Capital. They loaned 777 Partners, who were the eventual purchaser of Everton, £158 million for their stadium. Now, the two connotations of that rule, bear with me because it does come back to Tottenham Hotspur, I promise you. That loan was a convertible loan note, which basically means that it's a loan until it's not, and then it can convert into ownership if the terms of the trade are appealing to both sides. And in this particular case, they were, but the loan was not paid back on time. There was a deadline for the loan to be paid back by 777 Partners, and the money was supposed to go towards Everton's stadium build. It didn't happen. They got a mutual extension, which has subsequently passed as well. And so technically, if the laws will enforce it, then Everton will have to hand over the stadium as collateral on the loan to MSP Capital. Now, why is that relevant to Tottenham? Or two reasons, really. One is, how confident are you in someone coming into our football club who has already made an investment that should have been uncovered? The weaknesses, the fragilities of the investment should have been uncovered. 777 Partners were already being sued by all and sundry over the last couple of years. They've been described as a giant Ponzi scheme in Australia, in South America, in the Americas themselves, and now, of course, in Europe. They have the 5 teams in Europe that are all suddenly looking like they're going to have to raise money because they're robbing Peter to pay Paul. I just think that there's, sometimes you can forgive. If you're a businessman, you can try your best to do your due diligence, and someone can fool you with, snake oil salesman, whatever. You see it all the time. But when it comes to that level of professionalism, that level of legality, to have not spotted the red flags with regards to 777 Partners is a bit of a red flag for me about MSP. That's not to say that they're not good multi-club ownership models. In fact, they have 5 or 6 teams. They've got Al Quran. I've got the names here. Let's have a look at them. They have FC Augsburg in Germany, who finished 13th in the Bundesliga. They have Estoril, who finished 13th. Bromby, who finished 2nd. SK Beveren, who are in the second division of that league. And Alcorcon in Spain, who I believe have just been relegated. So not the greatest results from MSP Capital season in terms of success. But look, I don't think you necessarily have to judge a multi-club owner by the success of each individual outlets. What you have to take some sort of credit from, or some sort of some notice of, is it's bloody hard starting a multi-club ownership. As I say, buying your first club, where it's just a lot of cost, a lot of fighting between the two clubs over who gets the resources. If one club gets themselves in financial pickle, or needs more money for a new training ground, infrastructure spend, all the stuff that doesn't affect your FFP, but the owners can invest into the club. Well, think of it like, imagine that the money for the hotels that we're building was coming straight from the same budget that could be spent on, replacing Harry Kane. You're kicking the can down the road to hopefully get the revenues later on. That money's already been pre-identified from ENIC anyway, so it's nothing to do with it. But the point I'm trying to make is that you're kicking the can down the road in terms of investment now, so that you'll get the dividend and the yield all the way in the future. That will help those overall revenues in line with the rules. But if you had a second club that was really struggling in that model, how would they feel about playing second fiddle to your interests? And I always say that Red Bull and their system, Leipzig and Salzburg, they have a very unique relationship. But if you look into their history, one didn't buy the other. It was kind of a merging. It was before the rules of MCO were set up. It was just a unique sort of structure to it that has continued to thrive. City Football Group is the best example, being able to, if you're limited by what you can spend because you've got limitless wealth, if you're limited by what you can spend in one country for one club, then the obvious answer is to try and seek economies of scale and efficiencies in going after every corner of the world. And as I say, the benefits of getting it right are phenomenal. You have that brand in your local in the local geography. You have the ability to share learnings. You have the ability to loan players back and forth if you want to. You have the ability, potentially, in the case of like Manchester City with that player from Girona, to buy their best talents at half the price, because what's good for the goose is good for the gander. To me, all of these things, I love the idea of a multi-club ownership. You've heard me say it 1,000 times. I believe that's the reason why Scott Munn was brought into the football club. He knows City Football Group. He was the chief of City Football Group Asia, and he's very familiar with, I guess, the starting blocks of how to do it. Let's not forget, of course, ENIC were the breakers of ground on multi-club ownership way back in the 90s, until the rules were changed to make what they were doing unfair. And ever since then, the rules have loosened to the point where they're basically irrelevant anyway. So I do think there's an absolute desire for a multi-club ownership model at Tottenham, as long as you get it right. And I think that with Scott Munn and his experience, and Daniel Levy and ENIC's experience, these guys are familiar with the process. They're not going in blind. And I think that it will be fascinating to start our own MCO. Whether we want to bolt on, and I'm not sure this is what this whole investment thesis is about, with Jam the Jaffe, is he looking to just invest capital, or is he looking to essentially, if it's a 40% stake, which is what the articles are saying, then that could look and feel a lot like other teams coming into the system as well. It might not, though. It might not. It might entirely not. Daniel Levy doesn't want to have brand continuity with anybody else. One of the benefits, obviously, of the City Football Group is that you have City at the end of every single name around the world. Can you imagine Tottenham having Brøndby Hotspur? I don't think so. And how do those fans feel about that? You've got to consider them too. If you're playing second, third fiddle to a bigger team, and ultimately everything that you're doing is promoting your best talents just to lose them to your Premier League teammate, then I'm not sure. Listen, I'm not sure how it's going to go down. What I would say, though, the last thing is, which I think is very much a matter of fact on the topic, is that there is a rule that says that an owner cannot have 10% or more of a stake in a second club in the Premier League if he already has a stake in the first. And if it's true that Everton and 777 partners fall apart, which it looks like they will, because they have the Ponzi scheme to figure out, then it looks likely that they won't get their money back. MSP Capital won't get their £158 million back. And so consequently they'll inherit a stadium which would be considered as part of the infrastructure, which would therefore be considered a slice of the ownership of the football club. And when the football club Everton, apparently according to what I saw today, is only valued at £600 million in its entirety, and they already have £660 million worth of debt, then it becomes incredibly complicated in math to figure out a way where it becomes even remotely juicy for MSP Capital to say, forget the debt, I'll take the stadium. There's loads of teams in the Premier League that don't own their own stadium, that rent it from someone else. Manchester City do, West Ham do. I think there's a few others. Crystal Palace might as well. And it's not necessarily, the be-all and end-all to own your own stadium, although Daniel Levy's making good use of his. But the point I'm trying to make is, sorry, I'm rambling here today, I'm totally unprofessional doing this. This is a terrible video. But the point I'm trying to make is that if MSP Capital end up inheriting half the stadium as a consequence of the debt that's not been repaid by 777 partners, then they, I don't think, will be able to legally own any more than 10% of Tottenham Hotspur. And is 10% really worth getting out of bed for? And the final question I'll ask of you is, what does the intention of Daniel Levy looking for investment mean? Bearing in mind that he turned down a bid last year of 3.75 billion from Jam the Jaffe, allegedly, he had no intentions of selling. Ali Gold has come out yesterday and said that he's over the idea that there is any intention to sell, although there might still be conversations going on as per usual. But you've already heard from Daniel Levy that he is in fact looking and talking to investors. But what does that mean about the motivations of Daniel Levy? Whether or not the number's 10% or whether it's 40% or whatever has been touted, does he see peak valuations in football as a consequence of FFP and PSR? Does he see a scenario now where the juice is less worth the squeeze than it was? Because Jam the Jaffe would have paid 3.75 billion that was rejected out of hand for 100% of the club. How much would he have to pay for 40%? I guarantee you on a pro rata basis it will be more. Despite Tottenham having a fairly disappointing season, I would say that just generally speaking, valuations in football are going up. And so what's the motivation for Daniel Levy to want to sell a slice of the pie? Bearing in mind, he doesn't own the club outright himself. He's a major shareholder alongside ENIC. He owns a lot of ENIC and so therefore he's in charge of the club. There's the minority shareholders as well. I'm just trying to figure out here, and I haven't landed on it. Maybe by tomorrow when I'm back fluent with my wording here, maybe I'll have some more detail for you, but because I'm doing as much research as I can. But to me, the motivation to sell now or to sell a slice now, I don't really understand it. It was only 2 years ago he promised £150 million of his own money, him and ENIC's money, and they did that at a dilution of the capital. They only put £100 million in, which I'm still angry about, but they did that at a dilution of the other shareholders of about 2.5% to 3%, which I think at the time meant that the overall valuation of the football club was 7.5 billion, which was way too high. But the reason why you would do that, you would invest money at and over the odds, is because it sets the precedent of what the last financial round was on a business. So he put £100 million in because he wanted to make it work. Then he turned down a bid a year later for a club that he didn't want to sell. And now he's potentially interested in selling nearly half of the club to an outsider who will have their own motivations, who will have their own power struggles. And the divisions of labour, have they ever been respected? Have they ever? I mean, listen, Daniel Levy, for sure, like I say, I criticise him once a week. Here's my criticism of Daniel Levy. He obviously gets involved way too much in transfers that he shouldn't. So, does that change? Is there going to be any kind of, I don't know, as I say, divisions of labour that are kept to? It complicates the matter. And if I'm entirely honest, looking at the list of 5 clubs that the MCO already operates in, and looking at their performance, looking at the amount of money that they make, the amount of money that they spend, the amount of money that they bring in through losses, I'll stick them up on the screen if I can for you. It really doesn't look like it's that appetising, and I've just got a bad feeling around this. Like I said in last week's video that whenever I've looked into Jam the Jaffe, he looks like a straight up businessman. Looks like a very good guy. He does very well with the McLaren F1 team, and that's great. But his footballing results haven't really proven to be spectacular, and I don't know the teams that well, so I can't comment on as to why that is. And it's difficult. I've tried searching for, how do the fans of these clubs feel about their owners to get a vibe, and yeah, not a lot of information I can give you there. I'll keep digging, guys. I'll keep digging. But yeah, MSP Capital, for me, it all depends on the structure of the deal. It all depends on what's included and at what valuation. Also, it's an interesting one that the minority shareholders don't get a say in this once again, as far as I can tell, or thus far. So, yeah, I'm going to keep my powder dry on this one, guys. If you are someone that's Levy out and anyone but him will do, then I'll be honest, Jam the Jaffe could be a lot worse. You could go and get the guy, John Textor, from Eagle Holdings. You could go and get There's a few others out there, 777 partners, that will bankrupt you. I don't know. I just got a little bit of a question mark as to why it was that they gave that company £158 million and didn't do their due diligence on the fact that that company has got so many lawsuits. It looks a little bit sloppy to me, and on that basis, until more information comes out, then I'm going to leave it and say I am okay. Guys, just quickly, I know I've been talking for 20 minutes on this one, but other news, I'll keep you for 2 more minutes. Santiago Jimenez apparently says yes to Tottenham. Apparently he wants to come. You know, I've been touting about this guy for 2 years. Worried slightly that when you finally get a player that you've been screaming for, if they underperform, guess who's going to be in the mud? And the second half of his season, he's looked a little bit scratchy, if I'm entirely honest. And so I'm a little bit nervous, but I still believe in the player that I've seen. I think the guy's very, very talented, two-footed, good, strong runner with the ball, and good in the air. And I think, you know, just generally I've got a vibe that I think he'll make it, which is good news. And the last one I haven't even spoken to you about as well is Richalison. Everywhere in the papers today, everywhere on Twitter, Eze is Tottenham's #1 target. Hallelujah, if true. Hallelujah. That will be something that, you know, I don't know whether you call it statement signings, but that is a player that you would hope everyone will universally get behind at Tottenham. All of the infighting of late, all of the divisiveness is palpable. Some justified, some un. But Richalison would do a lot to hopefully see a smile on some people's faces. Maybe not, to be honest. But it'd be great to see him coming in. I haven't seen the substance of the source. I don't know why it's been talked about, but it's been shared by absolutely everybody that he is our #1 target. Be fantastic to see it done. And that's about it, guys. I'll bring you another video later on because I am 22 minutes in, and I'm really sorry. This has been one of the worst, most cluttered and clattered videos I've done, but it's been a 4-day break, and you get a little bit cold, don't you? Like, subscribe, and comment, guys. And as always, bye-bye!